Hey there, Jimmy from DragonPainter Miniatures here. In this video I'm going to show you how to paint the wizard Oman Ruul from Reaper to tabletop standard. This is a slightly more advanced level of painting but still uses many of the basic techniques discussed in the core video. I'll cover them all again in depth here. First things first, get yourself into some clothes that don't cost the entire GDP of a small country. Find a suitable surface to paint on. This desk is older than most pop stars and is absolutely perfect for the job. Firstly, let's open him up. As before, we need to clean the model up. Take a sharp knife and always cut away from yourself. Gently scrape away the casting lines from the model with the back of the blade. This is really easy to do and prevents cutting chunks of the model off by accident. You can use a file to tidy up any remaining flash. So once more we have our white piece of plasticard to use as a palette. You can use a plate but make sure it isn't your mum's fine china. I've base coated Oman Ruul in polished bone with my airbrush. You can easily do this by hand though. You mustn't use spray primers with Reaper Bones miniatures as it reacts poorly to the plastic. Today we'll be using the Reaper colours from the core box: Earth Brown, Fair Shadow, Polished Bone and True Blue. But this time with the addition of Snow Shadow, Pure Black and honed steel. Firstly we need to base coat his sash, cloak, hat and orb with True Blue. Give this paint a good shake as it can separate in storage. Put some on your palette and paint a thin layer onto all the areas that we want to be blue. You may need 2 thin coats at this stage. This is normal. The next step, paint his beard and eyebrows with Snow Shadow and any stray hair poking out from under his hat. There we see his beard is now looking majestic and grey. Base coat his exposed skin with Fair Shadow in much the same way. The next base coat is his metal areas. For this we will use honed steel. Make sure you shake metallic paints for a little bit longer as they can separate to a higher degree than regular colours. Paint his magic bracelet and the clasp on the back of his cloak with honed steel. At least I assume it's a magic bracelet, he could just be a big fan of accessorising. Finally, for the base coating stage we need to paint his belt, shoes and base with Earth Brown. Now we can move on to stage 2, the washes. Firstly we want to take True Blue and a tiny smidge of Pure Black. Honestly, like a 90-10 mix of blue to black, as the black is a very strong colour. Dilute this with water until it resembles the consistency of milk. A good trick here is to add a tiny bit of hand soap to break the surface tension. Wash this mixture into the deep folds on his cloak and sash and around the base of his orb. Make sure this dries fully before moving on to the next wash. Next we mix 50-50 Earth Brown and Polished Bone together and water this down and gently brush it into the folds on his robe. If we do the same for his skin with a 50-50 mix of Fair Shadow and Earth Brown. Finally, we want to water down Pure Black into an even thinner consistency, like skimmed milk, which is basically water that's lying about being milk, and wash this over his beard, eyebrows and bracelet. Any mistakes can be fixed at this stage with the base colour, especially where the washes may have run onto areas where you didn't want them to go. So there we see all the washes are done. Next we move on to stage 3, which is layering. First we want to take his robes and recoat them with Polished Bone, making sure that we don't get any in the recesses where we've painted the wash. So there we see his robes have been layered up. Do the same with Snow Shadow for his beard, making sure that the black wash remains in the recesses. Do the same with honed steel for his bracelet. And repeat with Fair Shadow for his skin, leaving the dark wash between his fingers and around his eyes. So now we can move on to what is essentially the final main stage, which is highlights. Firstly, we need to highlight his cloak, orb, hat and sash with a 70-30 mix of true blue and polished bone. Paint a line down the centre of each fold on his cloak, making sure to leave some of the previous colour showing to either side to make a basic colour gradient. Paint the upper half of his orb too. When it comes to his hat, because it has no sharply defined edge, paint the upper 3/4 of it in this lighter mix, leaving the darker shade at the bottom, and try and feather the edge slightly so it blends into the darker colour. Next we will highlight his skin with a 50-50 mix of polished bone and fair shadow, concentrating on his nose and cheekbones, and the upper surface of his raised hand where the light will be catching it. Next we will mix true blue with polished bone in a 50-50 mix and paint it just along the absolute edges of his cloak and hood to sharpen the model visually. This is called edge highlighting, and it takes a bit of patience and a steady hand, but looks great when it's done. Do the same for his beard with 50-50 snow shadow and polished bone, painting the upper surfaces and leaving the previous colour in the recesses. And finally, take some earth brown and mix it with your skin highlight mix and paint the tips of his shoes. So that's the highlight stage complete. Next we will mix 50-50 earth brown and fair shadow. Mix them with an old brush, wipe most of the paint off on a paper towel and then lightly brush it across his base to bring out the raised detail. This is called dry brushing and is really simple, but it gives great results quickly. Finally, all we have to do is carefully paint in his eyes with polished bone, and using a thin brush or even the tip of a safety pin, put a tiny spot of pure black in the centre of his eyes for the pupil. And there we have it, the Reaper Bones Miniatures Wizard Oman Ruul, painted to tabletop standard in very little time. Make sure to join us for our next video where I'll show you how to paint Oman Ruul to display standard. May your dice always roll 6s. Happy gaming!